Hello, hello. It is time once again to have ourselves another manga chat about stuff that I've been reading recently. First, we'll talk about some sad news in the Western manga reading, or really the worldwide reading manga community. As I'm sure you're likely aware, Mangadex got nuked, absolutely nuked by a massive DMCA takedown at the behest of various Japanese manga publishers. Something like 3,000 series, I think, was the final count, got hit. It's very annoying. It's very frustrating for a wide number of reasons. But, I'm sure, as you're aware, be assured, nothing was truly lost. Ever since Mangadex first existed, there have been all sorts of mirrors and clones of all the content on it. I honestly thought these sites were kind of scummy because basically they would just, without asking, rehost all of these scanlations and typically staple like a million ads to every page to try to earn a quick buck off of other people's work. But now they have proven themselves to be a very, very necessary evil. And some pretty decent sites are in the mix, like sites that weren't doing that sort of scummy stuff, but instead were just kind of archiving as good practice that now have been called into action. So everything that you could have read on Mangadex, you can find elsewhere. Be assured. But nevertheless, it is very frustrating and very sad for a number of reasons that I will now enumerate on this helpful slide here. First off, yeah, it is ultimately ineffectual. They have managed to cut off one head of the Hydra, but that does nothing to mar the progression of piracy as a whole. All they've really succeeded in doing is building resentment among people that might otherwise one day become their customers, people that likely already were their customers in many ways. Um, they should know better by now that this does absolutely nothing to stem the flow of piracy as a whole. They took down one manga, they took down Batoto, they've taken down many other sites that aren't in that kind of core lineage of sites that I used. They've now taken down Mangadex in significant part, and they will take down the successor to Mangadex inevitably. And at no point is this actually going to reduce the amount of piracy happening or the number of people that choose to pirate instead of buying manga. It's just going to create a new wave of people that feel personally burned and slighted and will then go out of their way to boycott anyone involved in these takedowns. I'm not one of them. I buy a lot of manga. I plan to continue buying manga. As frustrated as I am with the decisions of these publishers and all of the future points of frustration I'm going to mention right here, I still, respect the industry a lot and want to contribute to it financially and to collect things. It's just shocking to me that they so naively seem to think that this will make a difference when they could have just given up on this battle a long time ago and saved themselves a lot of time and remained in much better standing with the community's goodwill. Because at the end of the day, this was something said by Gabe Newell of Valve, and I think it's the smartest thing that's ever been said about piracy, is that piracy is a service problem. That is, if you have a service that offers more access to content more conveniently than piracy, and it costs a reasonable amount of money, if it's cheap enough, people will pay that money even when they have the option to pirate. And I would say the entire history of streaming services and media access software in general is the history of people coming to this revelation and building offerings that compete with piracy, not by trying to defeat the invincible hydra that is piracy, but just giving a better option. Right now, manga publishers do not seem interested in this at all outside of Shueisha and their relationship with Viz. Viz, I think, is the only manga service available in the West, and it's not even broadly available in the West or in non-Japan countries. I think it's only available in North America. But it's the only one that like legitimately offers such a good selection with such convenience, such high quality scans, such speed and translation and getting out new chapters as soon as they're officially available in Japanese. And it's so cheap that it's the only one that I think has really understood how to tackle the issue of piracy. It's the only one that's operating in the mode of Spotify, of Netflix, of YouTube Premium, whatever. And of course, I have my qualms with those services. But I don't use any of those services. For me, piracy is still a much better option for like music and TV and stuff. But I do subscribe to the Viz. I that's the one digital service I subscribe to is Viz's manga offerings, because it's that good. Because it's supplanted piracy for those series at least. And I think they just have no interest whatsoever in offering this sort of alternative to piracy that can actually compete with piracy. Instead, all of the other official manga apps are really expensive and extremely disjoint with extremely limited catalogs, often much worse translations and scanlation, like typesetting and stuff, than the fan scanlations. There's some that are like using AI scanlation now that just has horrible results. They get chapters up really late. They're really just kind of like doing the bare minimum or really sub the bare minimum. God, I can remember one where you had to like gotcha for chapters. They tried to make it like a mobile game where you unlock chapters by spending money, and it's like a roulette of how many chapters you get. It's so absurd. It's just patently absurd. And I just really think that this is Japanese executives totally in denial of the current media industry landscape and how people sell media now. The other thing too is that there's the other side of this is the idea of a voluntary purchasing model, where basically at the end of the day, people will always have an option to get access to media without giving you, the owners, the publishers, the right holders, money. Either via piracy or buying things secondhand, borrowing them from a friend, borrowing it from libraries. There's so many ways for every single medium to skirt around paying the entire fee that you wish for them to pay. And even things like streaming services or the Viz subscription are already somewhat of a subversion of the traditional model, where instead of buying a magazine every week or buying a tankobon or something, I am just paying a fee every month to get that same access. Obviously some money there is going back to the publishers and Suecia and stuff, but it's nowhere near as much as they did before. So the actual kind of standard offering, the maximally profitable and expensive offering, that is to say a movie ticket or the tankobon itself or whatever, a DVD, a CD, a vinyl album, that has always been and will always be somewhat of a voluntary purchase. And in part, people make that purchase because it may be like a better experience, such as seeing a movie in a theater. Maybe in part because they like sort of the ritualistic experience of making that definite purchase and engaging with it more specifically rather than just kind of turning on the tap of content from a streaming service. Maybe it's because they like collecting. Maybe it's because they just enjoy the access that comes with having a shelf full of things and kind of taking them down on a whim. I qualify for a lot of those things. I spend thousands and thousands of dollars on manga every year and other thousands on things like movie tickets and vinyls and stuff. I am a collector. I enjoy all of those things. But moreover, for me, and I think this is true for a lot of people, part of the voluntary purchase model is because they genuinely just want to give money to the creators. They just want a way to express their love for this media by giving money, by supporting them, by making them more successful, by increasing their standings within rankings of sales, and giving them more exposure and creating this sort of like snowballing success. For me, yeah, that's like a major reason I make these purchases, because I love this series and I love the creator and I want to express that through the purchase. I think this is also why merch sells so well. So much merch is useless. It's like garbage. And you can enjoy having it, enjoy collecting it and stuff, but it has very little actual utility. I think you're mostly buying it just as a show of support for the creator. Same with like the Patreon model. So many people's Patreons do not actually give very much exclusive access. The primary output of them artistically is available to everyone for free, or if it's not, you can probably pirate it or whatever. But people sign up for the Patreon just to be patrons of that artist, to feel like they're supporting that lifestyle and keeping that artist in business. And this is how it already works with manga tremendously successfully. People know about manga piracy. Without Mangadex, they still know about it. Without any particular site, they still know about it. They know that there's a way to read it for free. They know that they can go to the library and read it. They know that they can just sit there in a bookstore and flip through the entire thing without paying a dime. They know that they can buy it secondhand on Facebook Marketplace and eBay. Despite all of that, manga is selling like absolute fresh off the grill hotcakes. Every single bookstore you go into has shelves and shelves and shelves of manga because it's selling so well. If you go on Amazon bestseller rankings, manga, 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 the industry is flying higher than ever before. And I would say that almost all of those purchases are made not because somebody's like, well, I really want to read One Piece, and the only way for me to read One Piece is to buy every volume of One Piece. I don't think there's anybody on the planet that genuinely thinks that. No, they buy it because they love One Piece. They're making a voluntary purchase because they're already a fan of the series, and One Piece keeps racketing up all these sales in the West. It works. It's already working. And I think the introduction of piracy or a streaming model or the equivalent, or anything that just gives people more access to your artistic output for as cheap as possible, as readily available as possible, broadcasts it to as many people as possible. Because of this voluntary purchase model, basically all you're trying to do is increase the raw number of fans you have. It's not about the percentage of fans that pay, because whatever factor that is, whatever percentage that is, isn't scaled to any costs. It doesn't cost you any more to have more people pirate your manga. And yet, for every fan that you create, whatever percentage of them go on to make actual purchases, the more fans, the more purchases. Like, it's just simple math. If I say that, you know, 1 million people end up pirating my manga and reading it, and 2% of those people go on to buy it, that's... Why did I choose actual numbers, man? I don't want to do math. That's a lot of people! But if I do everything I can to clamp down on the number of people reading it, and only 2,000 people read it, maybe through that clamping down, 50% of them actually buy it and make some sort of purchase. But that's a way lower number than the spam piracy aim for fandom approach. And you can be like, oh, well, that's all hypothetical. Yeah, you can come up with numbers to tell a story. But I'm describing what already happened. I'm describing the actual rise of manga and anime as entertainment in the West. This is literally exactly what happened. It propagated through piracy. It propagated through people watching for free in any number of different ways. And then when they were already fans, when there was already a community and already a culture and already this ravenous Western fandom, that's when the money started getting spent. You can't put the cart before the horse here. You can't introduce a product out of the blue and say, please buy this new series. People don't have the exposure to get to read it. They don't have the exposure to become fans of it. All of the series that have kind of exploded out of the gate in the West were because people were watching the anime adaptation on something like Crunchyroll, not buying the DVDs, or they were pirating the manga and were excited for the English localization when it came out. That's like pretty much all the manga I buy is because I was pirating it first, and then I was like, oh, sweet, this is getting localized. I'm definitely going to buy it when it comes out in English. It works. It's the only thing that's worked. Why are they trying to mess with the entire foundation of the business model of selling manga in the West? It makes no earthly sense. Moreover, this, like, let's shift gears into my professional life. I am a marketer, okay? I work in marketing. This is true. I don't know if I've ever said that on the channel before. If I was told, if I am, head of the depart, if I'm in marketing in Shueisha, and I'm in charge of choosing which series which series are we gonna bring to the West, or if I'm at like Viz or Seven Seas or something, and I'm like, okay, what series should I negotiate with the publishers to bring to the West? You know what is like hands down by far the holy grail of marketing data? You know what would make my job so easy and so foolproof and so easy to get money behind confidently? If there was a whole bunch of people out there who are already reading all of the different series that are options for me to consider and commenting on it, talking about what they liked about it, talking about other series with a shared profile so that I could click their username and go, oh wow, this person who really loves series X also loves series Y and Z that are great sellers. This is giving me a really strong incentive. People talking about their personal lives, pegging themselves into different demographics of income and gender and age and location, basically profiling themselves to such an amazing extent that you can, like, so guaranteed drop a bomb of that new series at that new demographic with that advertising spend and those targets, and be like so confident, more confident than you could ever be otherwise, that it will sell. This is like, I cannot conceive of better marketing data than Mangadex for Japanese publishers or for manga publishers in the West. It is like, okay, so like I work for a tech company, right? If I found out that a whole bunch of people had pirated our software and they were going on a forum, a publicly available forum, and just talking about how much they like it and how much they use it and what they particularly use it for and what sort of results they've seen and what other programs they use with it and what their kind of day-to-day life is or whatever, I would be overjoyed. I would fight tooth and nail to the rest of my company to allow these people to continue pirating our software and to spread this good word like that. There would be literally nothing that could make my job easier, that would make my marketing work more effective, that would advance our marketing efforts as a company more. You literally can't pay for that. We are literally trying to pay people to use our software and give us feedback. You have to actually incentivize that. You can't just offer a free trial and hope to get a ton of people. You have to say, hey, try our software and leave a review and we'll give you an Amazon gift card. This is widespread across software startups. Everybody has to do this. And even then, it's not as good because you're like incentivizing it and people come in with sort of a biased conception that they know they're getting paid to review it, and that sort of taints the review. It's inorganic. You're only going to get certain types of people compared to the stuff that was for free for thousands and thousands of series on Mangadex. The stuff that we are paying for is trash. and it's the same with media companies. Media companies are doing focus groups all the time where they pay people. They only get the type of people that attend focus group, which is already an extremely filtered, unrepresentative market. They're paying to run these focus groups. They're expensive. They need consultants. They need people to process the data. They need all this sort of stuff to figure out what sort of audience exists for different media properties. And here was a gigantic forum where people from all over the world, self identifying in a number of different valuable ways for demographic marketing, are just saying voluntarily, organically, eagerly how they feel about different series. I am sure with like to talk about putting your thumb on the scale a little bit, if you actually wanted to put some effort behind it and not just gobble up this entire great buffet of marketing research, you know how easy it would be to go onto Mangadex and just make a thread that's like, what manga would you love to see localized into English? You would get hundreds of replies. That would just instantly like plan out your quarter if you wanted it to. It's so frustrating. They just threw it all in the trash. Why? I think it really just comes down to ignorance and the fact that it's hard for them to imagine how new, how early this industry is in the West. Because the thing, and this is maybe the most frustrating part, is that the model I'm proposing in the West of piracy or just any form of reading it without paying for it, and then making voluntary purchases to show your support, among other things, is also the method that they use in Japan. That's how the manga industry in Japan works. There is nowhere in the world where it is easier to read manga for free than Japan. They have manga cafes. They have Book Off. They have manga in every like random ass diner, every family ass restaurant. You can ask your friend for manga. You can go to the library. You can do anything you want. You can go to a secondhand store and buy volumes of manga for like 200 yen each, and the publisher will never see a dime of that. But you can read all of the world's manga by doing that trivially. Like, the fact that people in Japan are still going to stores and buying a new volume of manga for full price directly towards the publisher on release day or whatever is definitely a voluntary purchase. It is just the same as people going to their local bookstore here and buying a volume of manga that they've already read on a piracy site. And I think they genuinely don't like it. You can't see the forest for the trees, you know? They might, if they really thought about it, realize that this is how manga works in Japan. But even if they did, I assume that they also think that that's how it works here. And that, you know, probably the idea of the unauthorization of Mangadex or whatever just drives them a little bit screwy. But the fact is that, like, that's, like, they're not going, why can't these people go to a manga cafe? I think in Japan, piracy sites are seen as like strange and abhorrent because there's kind of like a proper way to do piracy. You have to go tachiyomi at Book Off if you want to read the series and not pay. You have to go book an hour at a manga cafe and plunk down. And it's kind of these like otaku activities where there's a demographic in mind and there's still money being paid at some stage of the transaction likely, even though none of that money actually goes back to the publishers. Oh, and fun fact, publishers did try to stop manga cafes at one point, which is, it just seems so like asinine. There's been all sorts of debates over the years about like the legality of secondhand purchasing of like books and CDs and stuff. And it's all nonsense. And I think it really exposes the fact that there isn't anything like morally abhorrent about piracy. It's just yet another battle that these publishers and stuff are fighting hopelessly. That to them is no different than things that I'm sure nobody thinks that secondhand purchasing is immoral. I don't know, maybe they do. People are insane. I'm rambling now. But it really just feels like they don't understand what's laying the golden eggs over here. Even though it's the same goose that's laying the golden eggs over there, it just looks a little different. I don't know. It's such a piss off. And it's like, you know, like, this isn't gonna bring us any. They took down so many series that have no English localization, that are probably never, ever, ever, ever gonna get an English localization. Who in their right mind is going to localize all of the obscure works of Fukumoto when we can barely get like the entirety of part one of Kaiji out of Denpa over like a 5 year period? Nobody is scooping up those rights. Nobody is fighting over them. Nobody is eager to publish these books in North America because they're niche. And the only way that they're going to stop being niche is if they are spread through piracy. If these people that own the rights to this manga ever want to make a buck off of it from Western audiences, they need piracy. They literally need piracy. The only way that One Day Outing Foreman is ever going to get an English release is if they look at it and they say, hey, a lot of people in North America are actually reading this and they seem to love it and they're talking about it all the time. That was the only one unlikely shining thread we had to reach that sort of recognition of the series, that sort of broadcasting of the series, something that I so dearly want because I love that series. And the rights owners themselves, the people that would profit most from that happening, the people who stood to have everything to gain, snipped that thread out of sheer blind legalism and spite. And when it comes down to, man, like, just talking about Foreman just now, I've talked about this before, but I love One Day Outing Foreman, the Kaiji spinoff, the slice of life. On Mangadex, we had a nice little community going of maybe a dozen or so people who, in the comments section after each chapter, would discuss the chapter and just kind of talk about how it pertained to their lives and share stories and joke around. And it was really lovely. It was such a spontaneous kind of ad hoc micro community, but I loved it, and it was really special to me. And I don't doubt that that is happening for many other series over and over again, all over Mangadex, and now that's just wiped out. And it feels really bad. It feels like not only am I being punished as a manga reader, I am in a way being punished as a manga lover, as someone who not just reads manga as a hobby, but wants to be part of a manga community, wants to share my love of manga, to discuss manga, to hear what other people love about manga, to broaden my tastes and broaden the tastes of others through that process. That's the whole reason I make videos like this. Like, what am I doing here? I'm going to probably talk for like an hour and a half about manga just because I love it that much. And this just feels like such a spit in the face of that entire idea. And like, on the one hand, I'm like, well, of course they did, you know, because it's piracy and it's illegal and it's unauthorized usage of things that they have the rights to. Of course they did. But it's just so mean. It's just so blatantly on its face mean for them to do that. Either a meanness of ignorance where they genuinely don't know how much this matters to so many people that love the thing that they are supposedly defending. I don't know if it's, and obviously it's ignorant and stupid on the business level, that turning a blind eye to this and pretending like you don't see it has demonstrably, so clearly demonstrably, so many benefits, and yet they choose to take it down anyways. Just that sort of business stupidity that I feel is so representative of outdated Japanese corporations. We see it time and time again, time and time again. Or if there is actually like a deliberate meanness of, you guys are having fun the wrong way, I would prefer you to suffer. I don't know, man. It's a lot. It sucks. But that's enough about it. That was my little list. Let's get to the actual manga, right? Because I got a lot to say too. Let's talk about a great success of Scanlation, Tori Kissa. This is a slice of life series that ran for a number of years. It finished quite a while ago, but at some point before it had finished, the scanlation stopped, but was picked up by another group quite recently, who made a really nice, valiant effort and got through the whole rest of the series. This is a very cute, very silly series about some birds that run a cafe. They're called avians. They're sort of half people, half bird. They live in a secluded little community in the forest where they are afraid of human beings discovering them and overrunning their sacred, well, not sacred, I don't think there's any implication that it's like sacred per se, but their traditional home where they've lived and loved and built a community. The humans are going to overrun it and build buildings there and commercialize it and everything. It's very reasonable. And yet a random businessman, Hirukazu, manages to just stumble upon it one day and is welcomed by the birds and accepted by the birds and starts to help them run this bird cafe and introduces them to human cuisine and human ingredients, and it becomes a big hit. There's this gigantic cast of other birds and people that kind of stumble in and out of their lives. And yeah, I really, really love this series. It's great mixture of goofy and great kind of like more elaborate sitcom-esque comedy setups. And of course, it's really heartfelt and lovely at times too. A nice sense of sentimentality, of connection and community and growth. And the finale was great. The finale really pulled out all the stops. Had some very exciting moments, some major climaxes. Usually these sorts of slice of life series are very episodic, and they can just kind of go on and on and on. So it's always interesting to me when they choose to end and how they go about actually ending like that. Here, it really does seem like they kind of had a list of all the things that should happen by the end of the series, and then in grand form kind of just executed on all these sort of long-awaited developments. To get a little spoilery, I guess, you can skip ahead. I did find it very interesting that it ends with the avians being fully welcomed into human society and like human avian relationships being established, and everybody gets along, everybody's happy. They relocate the bird cafe to the human city, and they don't bring up at all this, or rather they bring up this concern that the humans are gonna like overrun the mountain and chase the birds out of their home now that they know the birds exist. But they like don't really like address it. They don't really go, but now we know that blah 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 blah, so now we know it's gonna be okay. They're just kind of like, well, I guess we won't do that. We probably won't do that this time. And I just found that like a little strange, because it's like at the start you kind of have a feeling of like human society is intolerant and brutal and has no respect for the other, no respect for nature, etc., etc. You're like, pretty true, pretty true. But then by the end, when they've introduced more human characters and they've introduced kind of the setting of this town that's next to the mountain, it's like so disjoint from that characterization of human society that you're like, well, these folks are all right. And I don't know, it's just kind of weird. But I really liked it. All of the other developments that happened in the last few chapters were really satisfying as somebody who's been reading this for a long, long time now. Really happy to see it end. That sounded wrong. I'm sorry to see it go with the typical bittersweet feeling. I'm happy that it was brought to such a good conclusion. Check it out. Next, let's talk about the Manchuria Opium Squad. So this I read as part of an exciting new project happening on the manga reading Discord I'm a part of, which I've mentioned a few times in videos in the past. Basically, one of the members there started reading this series and started discussing it and posting about it and praising it and recommending it. And then just sort of like a flurry of a lot of other people started reading it as well. And it was just very fun to kind of spontaneously all be reading this series. It's like not a new series or anything. It's into its 20th volume, but everybody kind of picking it up at the same time and kind of going through it at approximately the same rate and discussing things as they were happening and stuff. Everybody really seemed to enjoy that, so it was decided that we ought to try like a monthly manga club where every month a different user nominates a few different series, and then we vote and decide on one. And then through that month, everybody kind of reads it together in that same sort of way and just sort of discusses it ad hoc and stuff. It's nothing too formal, it's nothing too structured. This was the inaugural edition. We kind of elevated it to being the first monthly manga, even though it predates that concept. And that was the point where I started reading it. Because everything people had been posting about it, I was like, I'm sure this is good, but it's not really for me. There's sort of, in general, just this sort of like, I would call it kind of like prestige crime genre that, in my mind, is like the manga equivalent of like Breaking Bad or The Wire or Sopranos or, what's that show about the bikers? Narcos or something. Oh, there's Sons of Anarchy too. I don't know. There's a lot of like critically acclaimed prestige TV that's like about violent crime and the battles of criminals and the underworld and blah 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 blah. And I don't watch too many of those shows. There's some I've watched and enjoyed, but not to the extent that I'm like, ooh, I ravenously devour this genre as a whole. And likewise with manga, I was always like, I don't know. There's other stuff I'd rather read. But getting into this one, kind of with that expectation, knowing that it was about opium dealers, I was actually really, really pleasantly surprised at how much more interesting it was than that. Like, not that just like a kind of gritty crime drama would be uninteresting per se, but it wouldn't really be up my alley. Whereas this was so much more, and so many of the things that I didn't expect about it were totally up my alley. So the series is about the state of Manchuria, which between World War One and Two was this place of like true international chaos. Basically a section of China that China, Russia, Japan, and to lesser extents like America, Southeast Asia, Mongolia, everybody kind of wanted a piece of. Everybody felt like they had some claim of ownership. The British as well, the French, everybody was involved. And it was a point of geopolitical relations, right on the precipice of World War II, where all of these sort of like microaggressions were starting to happen between these countries, where it wasn't just like, oh, well, Japan, China, America, we can all do business here. It was kind of like, this is a microcosm of all of our geopolitical beef. And now it's becoming this like powder keg. And speaking of powder, or I guess more like tar, opium was sweeping across the entire political, national class demographics of Manchuria. It was, a major opium epidemic. And this is all history I'm telling you right now. And this is a manga set in that historic period about a guy who's like an ex-Japanese soldier, was deployed over there, but was injured right away. And through a series of mishaps and stuff, he ends up trying to make money to go back to Japan and get the hell out of this chaotic hotbed that is Manchuria by producing and selling opium. And his kind of X factor, like Walter White, is that he just makes the bestest, darn tootinest, knock your socks off opium you will ever smoke. They call it true opium in the series, and time again, characters are blown away by how drastically different the effects of this opium and other opiums are. And then the way it proceeds is in a pretty like kind of traditional manga arc-based structure. I would say it kind of reminds me most of One Piece in terms of how the arcs are written, where they're always trying to like seize a new market to sell this true opium to. And it's like pretty much like One Piece. The crew rocks up to the place. There's already kind of some conflict happening. There's something on the precipice. There's some sort of unrest. There's some sort of instability. And then our squad just becomes this sort of crazy rogue X Factor where they have their own interests that sometimes align with other groups. The kind of overarching adversaries they have, which are a rival gang, the Green Gang, that's trying to operate their own opium trade in all these places, and then the actual like administration of that place. Kind of just feels like the other pirate crews and the Marines in a sense, insofar as each time it's like new adversaries, but it's always kind of like representations of those groups. And then the arc plays out. Everybody kind of has their own little adventures within the arc. Like One Piece as well, it's usually like they're underestimated coming in, but then the true opium is like so crazy potent that it creates this disruption, like Luffy going around and beating the shit out of somebody, that just falls totally outside the spectrum of what the enemy characters were anticipating. Although, like One Piece, now they've got a reputation, and whenever a new arc starts, they're like, I heard the true opium gang was coming. But yeah, I think that structure is fantastic. I love One Piece, and this is a big reason why, is because I think that sort of arc format has just so much potential. So that's already a big plus. And then the other thing that really, really just enthralls me and delights me about this series is just how like full of miserable bastards it is and how like cathartic it is. Time and time again, it's these plot lines of like really deplorable people doing shitty things and then getting hooked on true opium and going insane and going broke and totally succumbing to our heroes and handing over all their money. And it's just like, ooh. And it's kind of like an evil catharsis, because our heroes are not really presented at all as like paragons of virtue or morality. Some of them are like good people. The underground doctor they work with is certainly very selfless and heroic, and a lot of times they have kind of heroic motivations and stuff. Like they have a lot of loyalty to one another. They're always trying to save each other's butts, even when they put themselves in danger. They try to save like innocent people, bystanders and stuff. But at the end of the day, they're also getting tons and tons of people, both miserable bastards, but also just totally innocent people, hooked on opium. Like life-ruiningly potent opium that will completely drain them of all of their finances or future. And it's not like the author didn't think of this. It's not like I'm too woke and I'm reading into it too deep. But there are multiple plot lines where the character is shown to be like totally sympathetic and kind of on the side of virtue and heroism and stuff. And then at the end of the arc, it's like, and now she's addicted to opium. It's like, it's kind of crazy. Arcs where they're like working with the local nightlife and stuff to try to find people to deal to try to break into that network. It always involves like, hey, those dancers will probably know some high spending clients that we can sell opium to. Get the dancers hooked on opium. That'll be our in. And it's like, what do the dancers do? So it's like really cool, because I think having it all be so immoral, having it be so far removed from like any sense of virtue. Again, it's sort of like One Piece, except that One Piece, it's like, oh, the Straw Hats are pirates, so even though they're the good guys, they're kind of out there. It's not really that strong a theme, you know? Like, at the end of the day, they are just like heroes. They're great. They're always saving people. Whereas here, like, they feel like pirates. They feel like they are rolling up. They don't give a shit about people. They're in it for themselves. All they really have is the bonds with one another. And if it's convenient to their plan, they'll do some like heinous, heinous shit. Not just getting people addicted to opium, but a lot of the schemes are like blackmail, subterfuge, put somebody in like a life or death situation. And I just love that they don't spend any time like kind of wallowing in this. Like, I think if they spent time spending it, like, it happens occasionally, like they don't ignore this either. But if every chapter was Isamu going like, I just wanted a better life for my family, I can't believe I'm doing all this evil, I think it would get really tedious. But rather, most of the time they're just like locked in and they're just like doing shit. And it's just, I don't know, it's just like really satisfying. I hope I don't sound too evil. But just seeing like the power they wield and how freely they wield it, it's awesome. And then the actual like writing of the arcs too, like the predicaments they find themselves in and the way that they worm their way out of it, the way all the different characters' skill sets and personalities boil up to the surface at different times to make it happen. So keen, so entertaining, just sheer raw entertainment. I think that was the one thing that I thought, oh, the series is probably good, but it's probably like really heavy, and it probably is a lot about kind of like the historical position and the politics and the analysis. And I was like, that sounds good, but it's not really what I'm in the mood for. But I didn't recognize that it would just be so entertaining. That there's so many just like action sequences, car chases, fights, shootouts. A lot of torture sequences too. That doesn't do so much for me, but again, it's like you see some dude torturing somebody and you're like, that dude's gonna get addicted to opium. Or they're just gonna kill him. Either way is good. Oh man, yeah, so I'm having a blast. I really, really love the series. I think it just sits in such a unique position just with that morality. I'm really excited to see where it goes next. It starts with a flash forward, the traditional manga thing. And it's almost a curse with manga because a lot of them show that flash forward and then they don't actually like get there in the story. But I think this one's going strong. It's 20 volumes in. I think it's pretty popular. It's getting an official localization. I got bright hopes. I can't wait to see them ensnare all of Manchuria with their delicious, delicious opium. Yeah, I don't know. And I shouldn't say like, oh, there's no politics. Oh, there's no sense of that sort of historical analysis, because they do that too. And I actually really like the level at which they do that, where it doesn't really bog you down with all of the minutia, but rather that's just sort of the substructure that explains why certain groups are like beefing with each other, or like what one group wants or another. And just the way that they weave in so many different people's stories, like they're working with Jewish people that were ghettoized and are escaping from Germany, and it's like that's a pretty major historical event, and it's kind of brought to bear on the manga in a way that I think is really cool and really interesting, but again, not really harping on it, not morally grandstanding about it, but just providing that as a context in which specific characters and actions and settings manifest. I especially like, too, that as they kind of gather this is another One Piece type thing, at the end of almost every arc, they recruit somebody into their cause, and their ragtag group is, like, super multicultural. They got a Mongolian guy, they got a Russian guy, Japanese, Chinese, blah, 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 blah. And they don't harp on that either. I think, like... Oh god, can you imagine if this was made in like the West? Even if they kept up with like kind of the morally gray stuff, there's no way they would miss the opportunity to be like, we've come from so many cultures, but now we are united as one to sell opium. Yeah! And it would be the corniest shit. They just let it speak for itself. They just let it manifest naturally, and you're just like, that's cool, because all these characters have such different backstories, and backstories that represent that cultural heritage. So cool. Alright, great stuff. Manga, the monthly manga project is starting off strong. The next one we're reading is Drifting Dragons, which I haven't really plunged into yet. I just read the first chapter, but I quite liked it. It reminded me a lot of Dungeon Meshi, which is a big win from my book. Okay, now we're going to talk about two long-ass Weekly Shonen Jump series that I just finished recently. The first I had talked about in the last manga chat video, Sket Dance. Finished Sket Dance. Went into this with high hopes because I really like Witch Watch. I think ultimately I like this even better than Witch Watch. I would say Witch Watch has like a higher floor. He's gotten like a little more consistent, I think, with comedy writing, with character development. The dramatic storylines in Witch Watch pretty much always hit for me, whereas in Sket Dance, it's a bit of a crapshoot whether I'm like crying and super compelled or I'm just like, what the hell was that? But I would say the ceiling in Sket Dance is sky high. There's just so much like sauce in this manga that when it's cooking, when it's in form, it's one of my favorite things I've ever read. And I think the quality of that really comes down to the characters. Our main trio especially, I adore, and then especially Basan. Basan has become just one of my favorite manga characters ever. And it's hard for me to put into words what is so appealing about him. It's just such a unique blend of competence and incompetence, social graces and courage, while also being awkward and cringe and strange. I don't know, man. He's such a unique character, but he's not overtly weird or different from what you would expect from like a manga protagonist either. He still kind of like fits the bill, so to speak. But I really do feel like I could just read infinity chapters about Basan. I don't know. I was so endeared. But like I said, this series does have, I would say, like low lows. I actually dropped it for quite a while. I've been reading it pretty steadily as just the series I went to when I had time to read manga. You know, on the toilet, on the subway, whatever. And then I hit one arc that pissed me off so bad. I was like, nah, I just can't right now. I mean, I didn't like lose faith in the series, and I knew I'd come back to it sooner or later. But I was just like, if I keep reading it now, I'm just gonna probably get more and more pissed off, and it's probably gonna like dampen my enjoyment of stuff after this arc. So that's when I picked up the next series that we're gonna talk about, and started reading that for a little bit. And then I started just kind of like freely switching back and forth between them, kind of like arc by arc, or just as I felt like it. And I gotta say, because the next series we're going to talk about, I really love as well. That was just one of the best manga experiences, like manga reading lifestyles I've ever had, was kind of freely swapping between these two series on my whims in terms of what I was in the mood for. They're so different that it was always like one of them was just going to really hit for me. And through that method, I got through both of them. I finished both of them pretty recently. Okay, so this arc that made me drop it. It's the one where they go on their school trip. It's like a skiing trip. And you know that Saya wants to confess to Basan, okay? And you're like, oh, it's going to happen on the trip. This is going to be kind of the big major emotional climax of the trip. And then on the way to the trip, Himiko and Basun drink a body switching potion, and you're like, okay, that's funny. That's like very silly. I see where this is going. We're gonna have all of these kind of wacky misunderstandings of who's who and how should I act and how do I respond to this and blah 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 blah, and it's gonna accumulate in Saya confessing to Basan, who's actually Himiko. And I was like, ooh, this should be good. This should be good. It's a nice blend of the wacky and the heartfelt. It's going to be this whole, like, Frasier type misunderstanding comedy. But instead, there's like 4 chapters that are all dedicated to them not wanting to see their own, like not seeing the genitals of the body that they're in, which is like funny conceptually, you know. Oh, I'm in Himiko's body, but Himiko really doesn't want me to see her naked body, so I'm gonna wear a blindfold when I get changed. You can just kind of like have that happen in dialogue as like one joke, and you're like, I get it. Yeah, that's awkward. That's silly. They've probably off camera had a wacky misadventure with this, but no, not off camera. And I wouldn't even say wacky. And these chapters are like so strange and fetishy. The chapter where they're trying to pee and they have to like listen to loud music so they don't hear their body pee, and the other one is like directing them through the toilet and stuff. It's just like strange and like creepy, and they're both so like miserable and traumatized by it because it's just such a strange intrusive experience. They start like crying and stuff, and I'm sure it's meant to be funny, but I didn't really find it funny. I just like these characters so much, and it just felt so like unnecessarily cruel to them. And moreover, it was like this felt like it was coming at the cost of the sort of wacky adventures I was looking forward to. It seemed like it was coming at the cost of something that would just be like better written, more interesting, full of more jokes. And instead it was just sort of the same joke over and over again of like, don't you dare take off the blindfold. Okay, now pee. It's like, I didn't think I would be such a prude. I didn't think I had like limits like this where I'm like, that's over the line. And I think in a different manga, in a different context or something, maybe it would have been better. But man, I hated that arc. I was just like so miserable. But maybe it was for the best, because that's what motivated me to read this other series, and I had a great time, as for mentioned. But yeah, I'd say that was a low point. And then just random other chapters, I would be like, this gag is not that funny, and I can tell it's going to be the whole chapter. And I think this style of comedy, where kind of just keep like doubling down on jokes and have kind of one big wacky scenario and payoff per chapter or whatever, kind of like fitting into different modes of comedy with different characters and stuff, it's inherently going to be hit and miss. It's really hard to write like 250 chapters and have all of those jokes be funny to everybody. And that's fine. It is what it is. And I think with Witch Watch, they just kind of improved on that and got their batting average up a little bit. But as a result, I think the comedy ceiling is a little lower too, because if there is something that really resonates with you that you find really funny, they're not going to just spend the whole chapter doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on it, which is maybe what you would have enjoyed most. So, I don't know. Loved the ending. Loved the ending. Cried and cried and cried. I felt so sad saying farewell to these characters, but so happy for their future. One thing I'm going to do now is reread the Sket Dance crossover in Witch Watch, which I read way back when it happened in Witch Watch, and I was like, I don't know who these people are. That's fine. I'll just try to forget this in case I read the series at some point. And I managed to forget, like, I remember what happens in the chapters, but I don't remember what you learn about the Sket Dance characters, which is great. So I'll get to rediscover that. Yeah, I don't know, man. Can't praise this too much. Really great series. Just love Boston. He's so great. He's got to be like top 5 manga characters for me just ever now. But let's move on to the last series I want to talk about today, which is Hinomaru Sumo. This is the one that I picked up kind of to read as a brief antidotes for the insanity of Sket Dance. I correctly surmised that this would be totally different and not contain any gross fetishy stuff. Man, listen to me saying gross fetishy. Who have I become? I've become a normie. I've become a prude. Anyways, and I was correct. This is a very down the middle sports shonen, which is a term I've used before to describe iShield 21, where I think it really nicely falls dead center in the coordinates of a spectrum of like treats the sport very seriously and realistically, and treats the sport really over the top with superpowers, right in the middle, nothing too impossible or supernatural or otherworldly happens, and yet it has the spirit of characters having named special moves and all sorts of crazy. Oh, I need to sneeze. Oh my gosh. All sorts of like crazy, too perfect escalations and back and forths and stuff that wouldn't really happen in the sport of sumo. Nicely square in the middle there. Also, nicely square in the middle of focused on the sport action, focused on the techniques and strategy and grit and determination and all that stuff happening within the ring, and focused on characters and relationships and their ideologies and the character drama and backstories and stuff. Again, right down the middle. And I've noticed that series that manage to like really strike this balance become some of my favorites. Like I think Ice Shield is also quite like this. Ice Shield and maybe a little more like supernatural in terms of what actually happens in the football games, but not that much more. I think Kuroko's no Basket. Kuroko's Basketball. I said like the English title and the Japanese title at the same time. Kuroko's Basketball, also pretty down the middle in those spectrums. I think that's kind of the formula for me that works. It's not like all sports series I like are like that. Like I'd say something where, like say, Blue Box is much, much more focused on the relationships and characters and stuff than the sport. It's way over on that spectrum. Still love that series. So this isn't like a requirement. But I think there's like a certain appeal to sports manga that comes through strongest when they kind of strike that balance. So that's one thing to praise. The other thing that makes this not just on the tier of sports series I really like, which is where like Kuroko no Basket is, but up on the tier of iShield 21 of like my favorite sports shonen ever, I think this might be second place now to iShield, and it's close, is that there is kind of like an X factor too. With iShield, I would say it's Himura. Himura, also maybe top 5 manga character for me. Just so ruthlessly evil and scheming and diabolical and brilliant that it adds this whole other dimension to the series that no other series can hope to replicate. Here, there's somewhat similar of a character with the Yokozuna Jinro, but I would say the actual equivalent is the romantic relationship in this series, where it's something that a lot of sports series try to do and do kind of like obligatorily. Like I'd say iShield, as much as I love that series, definitely floundered in this regard, where they had love interest characters and harbored secret crushes and stuff, and they just didn't really do anything with it. Like, I don't really think that even qualifies as a spoiler, because it's just so evident that it's like an afterthought, and it's just kind of like, again, just sort of this feeling of like, well, it's something you would expect from a sports series, right? So let's toss that in the mix. Where in Hinomaru Sumo, it's not like the relationship has a major focus like it does in like Blue Box or something, but the way they do it, the way they go about integrating it into his character arc, all of the scenes and chapters that focus on it are just so good. It's just so well done. Like so well written, so compelling, so full of love and comedy and sadness and tragedy, and just this true feeling of bringing these characters to such depths, to such heights. Like really using it as an opportunity to study our main character in a different light, and really understand his personality, which in turn informs so well how he fights, like the way it kind of weaves these extra dimensions, these extra perspectives into the sumo itself. Kino, true Kino, and I think another kind of just like elevating to another dimension factor. Oh man, I feel like I'm gonna tear up just thinking about it. Um, it's the second thing to praise. I'm kind of going down a mental list in my head that's a little more structured than some of my other rambles. The third thing is that the format of sumo works really, really well for a manga, I think. Like the fighting itself, yes, already it's awesome. It's super kinetic and high impact, and there's all sorts of named techniques and different ways to fight and strategies that have all this complicated rock paper scissors relationship with one another, and the way the strategy reflects your personality, and so many things make it great in that sense. But then also just like the format of how the matches happen. So this is kind of spoilers, I guess. The first half of the series takes place when Hinomaru is in high school, and there's individual tournaments, which are pretty self-explanatory and work like any other tournament. But then they also compete in team tournaments, where it's 5v5, and whoever wins the majority of matches moves on to the next round. Now, I think sports series are great when you can truly maintain an ambiguity of who will win. And that's tough. It's tough because there's bounds to the type of narratives you can have, right? Like, and hope to continue being serialized in a magazine. So it's pretty hard to not be able to predict who's gonna win, who's gonna lose in a lot of situations. Here, I think they do a pretty good job because it's always like Hinomaru has his own path to professional sumo. He has his own goals of being yokozuna, to stand atop the sumo world. And so you never really know, like, if they lose, it sucks and it's devastating, but that's just a bump on the road. It doesn't mean like the series is over. So it does always feel ambiguous how those things are going to play out. But then because of the 5v5 format, it's like really ambiguous which of each individual match they'll win or lose, because they can win or they can lose twice and still advance to the next round. So even if you're confident that they're going to advance to the next round and win the overall match, each bout is so enthralling, so tense, so exciting because each and every one of them could lose. It's really, really good. It's really brilliant. And then after all of that, the second half of the series takes place when Hinomaru is a professional in the sumo leagues. And the way that sumo tournaments work, and this is how they work in real life, is it's like this multi-week period, I think usually like 14, 15 days, where each day that the tournament is running, I think there's like break days too, you just fight one person. And then you have a persistent record through all of that. And at the end, whoever has the best record wins. And that's very straightforward. But it makes for great manga because you have like the fights can happen in whatever order you like. He can lose as many as they want. He can win as many as they want. It doesn't necessarily prevent him from winning the entire tournament. Nor is he ever guaranteed to win the entire tournament. You know, like they can set it up to just maximize ambiguity and maximize the number of directions every given fight can take. The fact that it's like one fight per day too, it just builds in this kind of automatic rhythm of depicting how he's preparing for the next match and how he's watching the other matches of that day, and then just like the day's results heading into the next one. It's so good. Really, really gotta praise the structure. And then the last thing I'll praise is the ending. You know, as I read more and more Jump series in my infinite quest to become the Jump scholar, I realize, man, a lot of really, really good series, successful series that ran for a long ass time, still end up having completely bungered endings. And I don't really know exactly why. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for a lot of different series. I don't know if it's like the mangaka just decides they've had enough, or the series is actually like subtly waning in popularity and it hits some threshold where they're like, you gotta actually wrap it up in the next month or so. It could be any number of things, but it's like so obvious sometimes. Hikaru no Go, Toriko, Eye Shield. These are series that I love, that are like among my favorite Jump titles, period. That really have not great endings, like endings that just kind of feel like a deflation. And Hinomaru is not among them. Hinomaru goes so strong right up until the end. Maybe the pacing increases a little bit. It kind of starts to feel like matches that would normally get 2 or 3 chapters are only getting 1 chapter. But whatever, you still get to see all the matches you ought to. It still builds up to such a beautiful, amazing climax. That's my fifth point of praise, and maybe the other major X factor that just rocketed this up among my all-time sports shonen favorites. Like I said, probably numbers 2 to Eye Shield, and definitely in some ways, like the ending, surpasses Eye Shield. Really, really, really great series. I think it's totally overlooked in the West. I hadn't really heard anybody talk about it until fairly recently, when I saw it recommended, and I just sort of threw it on the list of stuff to read on a whim. But I'm blown away. The only thing that I think kind of kneecaps its popularity is that sumo just isn't that marketable in terms of like action figures or whatever. Other sports series, it's like, yeah, there's a dude in a football helmet and he runs really fast. There's a dude playing basketball, he looks cool. Other martial arts series, he's in a karate gi. He's cut. He looks badass. And then, most battle shonen and stuff, they got some awesome outfit or whatever. You want to cosplay it, you want to buy action figures. Sumo, it's like a big dude. Really tall, really jacked, but really, really fat. Just like an armor of fat and muscles. You're trying to maximize your weight, and you wear a loincloth that covers very little. And I think that poses certain challenges when it comes to marketing this series. That's the way it is. That's how sumo actually is. Sumo itself is amazing to read about. Watching highlights, Japan World, I think it is, or NHK Japan World, does English dubbed sumo highlights for all of the big sumo tournaments. I highly, highly recommend checking out. It's really great entertainment. They do a great job explaining kind of everything that's happening, the setups for all the matches. Reading Wikipedia even about the history of sumo is super fascinating. Just the fact that the role of Yokozuna has been this title that has carried such weight and significance going back literally hundreds of years, this lineage, so fascinating to read about. All of the sacred ritual bound up within sumo as well, that persists to the modern day and persists in all of the kind of like strange lifestyle of a sumo person, a sumo wrestler. Really, really, really fascinating, and I was already quite interested in all that stuff and quite, fond of educating myself in various ways about it. And then just to see all of that manifest in such a compelling story in this manga. Amazing. Okay, that's all I got. I want to watch the Summer Games Fest, so I'm going to do that. See you on the next manga chat. Manga will never die. Manga piracy will never die. Keep reading the stuff you love. Keep buying the stuff you love. Keep sharing the stuff you love with the people you love. I love manga. See you guys later.